Hello and welcome back, dear ladies and gentlemen, to our after-work session here on the third day of Formnext. I must admit, it feels kind of sad that we're already at the end of third day, but nevertheless, we of course have a last and final highlight of day 3 for you, because we invited 2 guests that can give us an insight or a view from a totally different perspective than we had anything before. But before I ask them, let me introduce them quickly. So to my right, welcome Elizabeth. I have Elizabeth Henry, founder and principal of Henry General Strategies, and we will talk a lot about your influence on additive manufacturing, Elizabeth, because there's quite a lot. And next, Thorsten Frahm, CEO from Frahm Sporting. You have a lot to do with bicycles, Thorsten. May I say that?
Yes.
Yes, and we will talk about that as well. So really interesting perspective, because probably we take a little bit of glance on things we haven't discussed yet. And finally, I want to introduce Frank Jablonski. You've never seen him before, but Frank, I hope you enjoyed the day so far. What were your highlights? Let's start with your perspective.
Yeah, my highlight is just been over. We had a very good discussion about some new applications, and the vendor BASF, they have a branch. They are doing solutions for their customers, and we're working together with the process with a company where we're very good in processes of AM technology, and they brought two experts or two companies here on stage which implemented new processes, new AM processes, and very impressive. There was one orthopedic company, and they do in handicraft. You know, it's not about, we are all talking about industries. No, I'm not industry. I'm craftsmanship. You know, we are working with our hands to do these soles, these orthopedic soles. And they implemented a new technology or a new process for producing these soles without needing to manipulate, to work on each sole. And so they are running in a hockey stick since September. Yeah. So they started in September, and now they have the concept online, and it's going, you know, right to the mountains.
Great. There was a tradition. Normally, I would start ladies first, but in this case, I need to hand over to Thorsten. Sorry for that.
Please, go ahead.
Sorry.
I'll speak up when I need to.
And I just discussed, I mean, we were talking a little bit about bicycles and what is feasible and what is not feasible. There are quite a few bikes presented. I can see one over there. What is your impression on, let's say, the bicycle aspect here at Formnext? And what do you think, where suits AM best in this industry?
First of all, I have to say it's my second year at Formnext, and it's always like coming to Candyland, right? So we are in the bicycle industry, get the picture like everything is possible. Yeah. Every dream can get happen. And then we have to learn a bit, first let's learn about the basic principles of 3D printing or these mechanisms. When I listen to you about the orthopedic insoles, that is something in cycling what is getting more than normal in the pro race series and now gets to the end consumer. Because there's, for example, the German bike fit company that comes from medical that is doing insoles for bikes. Because when you, for example, go to the Tour de France and you ride 3 weeks, you think, how can they do it? So everything has to match the body. Yeah. There was, I told you, I was in charge of a former TV movie I called about Loaded Later when he was a trial lead. And there was the machine human being. Mm-hmm. So, and everything what has to fit your body to make it more comfortable, to make more outcome for winning gold medals, or something to make it comfortable for normal people. Or I worked a longer time with medical, so people that maybe have some handicaps, and that makes to get so it is much more closer together than we believe. But it's also
it's very close,
much more far away from each other, because we cannot print everything what we would like.
Yeah, that's a funny aspect, because, I mean, looking at the bicycle competition, you are not allowed to print any frame you want, and it would never meet the quality standards. That's another part. So it's rather focusing on these, let's say, individualization on a body perspective, right? This is basically, like you mentioned, soles and like this what you mentioned, Frank, and like adaptation to the bike, right?
Yeah, let's stay, for example, cycling with the trial lead, right? We had silver medal or a second place at Kona this year with a lady, and the arm cups inside had been printed, so to match the arms. Because when you're 180K in this position and you have their pain in your arms, you cannot run a marathon anymore. But at the other side, I saw a lot of saddles here. So we talk always about the bike, right? And with the bike, I would say I saw a lot of bike ideas. What I would say, hey, can you take more modern things? We don't have rim brakes normally anymore. We have disc brakes. So, but when I see saddles or when I see computer mounts, like the one what you had at stage, when I see all these help topics, all these accessories, there's a lot of help what gets into our industry. And the frame printing, it is already in place, but we also have some rules, right?
Yeah, interesting. Elizabeth, you coming from a totally different perspective. You told me you're more into aerospace and defense consulting. Let me understand a little bit, or us a little bit, what is your key topic? Because it has a lot to do with human beings, right? It's not too much about technology, isn't it?
Well, everything's about technology, right? But to get this technology adopted by organizations or individuals, there's a huge learning curve. Just like you said, people want to do things with 3D printing, but you can't just print something like that. You need to figure out what material, what process. You need to get smart about the digital modeling. And just like you were saying, we're talking about craftsmanship. We're talking about a different kind of digital craftsmanship and a whole lot of learning that's going into it to allow people to really access the incredible things in our industry. So yes, I do think a lot about, the human and the organizational challenges, not just the technology.
This change management we already discussed in my panel right now from a craftsmanship, and you could see the pain in his eyes when he said how the people had to work differently in that new digital process, and that was surely not easy for them. So it's all about change management.
And I'd agree, it affects each industry very differently. For bicycle and athleticism and sports, you have these deeply personalized things like your bike. You ride on that for how many miles, how many hours, and it's something that you want to customize. You want it to personalize. You want it to reflect your needs. And how do you do that with this new industry?
But there's a big difference, right? So, for example, my dream, it is already in testing phase, but is to print the chamois into your cycling bibs.
Yeah. What is the chamois?
The chamois is when you have the cycling bibs, the thing where you sit with your your buttons.
Okay. It's the seat or the saddle.
And
I'm outed as not bicycle.
No. But when you measure everything with a mat between your body and the saddle and things, you can make it very customized. So when you see these products, that is not relevant to safety. So it's not to speed, not to power from outside. Right. But when you see, for example, a topic, what I learned last year at Formnext, I visited an exhibitor and I saw something. I thought, that is the solution for my OEM project right away. So I got in contact. I called the sales manager and said, hey, I have a project. Can we start it? So my dream was destroyed in the moment when we got deeper into the project, where she told me, no, it's not Candyland. You have to learn something. And then we talked with the engineers from cycling industry. And she told, hey, do you know what is 3D printing? And they told, no, but it's engineering. And then she asked, hey, we have a workshop. You can get us 2 engineers for free to learn about 3D printing. So I decided this moment we send a senior and we send a junior. What do you believe was the difference? The senior came back and he was really quiet. Yeah. The junior came back and said, it's amazing. I have to think totally different to make something happen.
Yeah.
And they learned about what is cost effective, because it's different to do CNC or 3D printing. What I have to know about materials, and it's a total new world. So transfer of technology, it's a big topic between industries to learn about it. If I do something like a pad inside of an arm cup for a triathlete, a saddle or a chamois into a bib short, that is more or less not relevant to safety. That is relevant to comfort.
Right.
Yeah.
But when it comes to safety topics, we have to think about fibers. That's not so easy.
Yeah.
It's not here yet. But it's all about the right approach, right? I mean, how do you consult companies to to turn the switch? Because Thorsten mentioned these old generation and young generation. Well, but I don't want to get too much into that old or young, because I consider myself of the age where probably I might be too critical, and I'm not, totally not. So I'm totally fascinated of the industry. So, but is that the same experience you do when consulting companies, and how do you change this, or how do you click the switch?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love your example of actually talking about an intergenerational team. I think it's wonderful when you have an industry like this that is disrupted by nature. And then we have some of these incredibly corporate partners and organizations that are participating and understanding that, you know, the additive or the 3D printing branch of their organization is going to be perhaps a little bit younger or a bit more disruptive or a bit more innovative in different ways than the rest of the organization. And what I'm seeing a lot of is how additive is actually it's actually ushering in a lot of change, whether it's processes within the organization, whether it's shifting to more of a digital format of either design or optimization of design, or just exploring new materials or new supply chains. What we're seeing is that there's a lot of cross-pollination happening. Anytime an organization has a group that's starting to explore something, maybe it's the R&D group, maybe it's the additive group, but whatever happens, as soon as it starts to shift into production, that's when it gets exciting. And usually that's when you have a specific industry pull. And that's when you have somebody either in aerospace, automotive, medical, even consumer goods say, no, this is what we want. And we're going to start scaling. So that's where I get really excited about additive, because it's no longer relegated to the R&D department. It's no longer just a couple of quirky folks who really like to do things in a very different way, or people who like to customize things. It's people who are saying, no, we can do this. Let's talk about, the dental industry. Let's talk about different ways that even the luxury jewelry market, can respond to this. Yeah. Or sports.
Which market you are talking about? Is it a certain market you have in mind when you share your experience?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. I worked with the Department of Defense as a contractor for 5.5 years, and so my consulting is largely overlapping with that community. So I'm mostly working with folks in aerospace and defense right now.
In the U.S.?
In the U.S. primarily, but I mean, a lot of folks want to do business in the U.S., and so there are a lot of different ways to do that.
It's a huge market,
and it's a very big country, and so there are a lot of different ways to do that, and many different industries to engage with. So a lot of, for instance, EMEA companies that are trying to do business in the U.S., you want to make sure you've got the right customers, and the Department of Defense is very large in the U.S. We have a lot of R&D even within the Department of Defense, so it's not it's a little bit different over there, and it's important to understand how it is.
And do you have insights? Is this the same way in Europe or in other parts of the world, or is it just a thing you're experiencing?
I think there are a lot of look. The additive manufacturing industry is a global first industry. It is a really new industry in a lot of ways. Sure, there's some folks that have been doing this for upwards of 40 years, but there are many more people who have come to this more recently. And I think we are a very digital first and very global first industry. And I think events like this are incredibly critical, because we need to see what everyone else is doing. Maybe for a couple of years, folks in the US are doing something a little bit different than folks in Germany or in France or in, India and China. We need to know what's going on. We need to scout it out, because the users are finding it. And if there's something that's possible, folks are going to start figuring it out. They're going to build teams around it.
Talking about users, in my opinion, in order to change the mindset, we should do something that is quite common in economics: listen to the customer. That's something probably we should do. Because, Thorsten, you mentioned the example where you got the adapter. That's a perfect example, in my opinion. No, don't get me wrong. No. In the end, it's about, I do have a dream. I like the example with the dream. I have a certain dream. I need a certain product. Mm-hmm. And instead of thinking, and how can I do it with classic manufacturing, or how can or how do I find a supplier? We should think probably, let's first try AM, because it might be the faster way. So tell us a story about the adapter. It's quite cool.
It was funny. I own a test team myself for media, and for OEM we have to do a lot of testing. And since my athlete career, I'm picky on product. So we got a product to test, and it was a case for a smartphone. So I should test it, but I did not like the mount to my bike. So it is a more than 10,000 euro bike. It's a road bike. It's light. It's aerodynamic, and the mount between the case was a little bit bulky. So I mentioned these in a podcast session. So 10 days later, my son came into the office and said, "Hey, Dad, you got something from the postman." And I opened it, and there was a little adapter from a 3D printer from a private person, and it was a letter like, now you can test your phone, because I mentioned what kind of case I have, what kind of mount I have from the normal market, and he made a little adapter. And my son saw it, he says, hey Dad, if you buy me a 3D printer, I can do it for you. So, and that's something like Candyland, right? That is doing something just in time.
Yeah.
So when I think back, now it's 30 years. So 30 years back was a long time to develop something. And then was the situation, the bike was ready, you want to present it to the brand or to the investors. Oh, it's not function because there's a little bit space missing or whatever. Today, it's easy, right? Oh, can we 3D print it to make a fit test if the components fit together? So you can save a lot of time.
Yeah.
And in these ways, you can keep the passion. So I see 3D printing, the industry, to keep passion and to make things possible. What maybe in our industry was a little bit the challenge is you have also to learn about how it can be efficient to the usage, because we know how normal materials function, but we don't know how the 3D printed product with the material function.
But we sure get to that point, I'm pretty sure.
Very quick, I guess. So
I hope so. As soon as we test it, that's basically it. Just try it out and see what is feasible. Aerospace and defense, they are quite would say, not really risk likely. I don't know the English word for that.
Risk averse.
Risk averse, let's put it that way. So how do you perceive the change in the mindset there? Are they open to 3D printing? Or is it only used for, let's say, risk-free parts? What is the development there?
That's a great question. And I think in any industry, there are tons of people that are trying to figure out, what can we do with all these new materials and processes. And I think, you have people that need something right now. It's immediate need. We have, in the DoD, we call that readiness. It's something that, it almost doesn't matter what it costs because it's keeping everything from working, right? And that's, and then you also have things that have a lot longer time to actually develop. So we have airworthiness, which is an entire concept, and you have a very strong, let's just say, risk management structure for anything that's going to be a critical part, for instance, and anything that's going to fly. And so you have completely different folks working in completely different kinds of additive manufacturing for both of those needs. And those are just two examples of tons of different needs. But when you have something that is, you've got a 3D printer at home and you're trying to figure out what to do, you want to play. And you want to experiment, you want to create, and you want to push the boundaries a little bit. And, you want to do, like we've got this brain over here. There's a fantastic art exhibit before. There's a brain and this is art, right? But what is it? It's showing us what's possible. Is it practical? I mean, it almost doesn't matter because now we know that sort of thing can exist.
We are still discussing whether it rather reflects Frank's or my brain. That's the topic here.
It's a big one. It should be yours. Well, mine is not so big.
I come from cycling. I would say it's the brain of your bike, because also in Frankfurt, because they have these color matched with yellow, so it's pink and yellow. So that matched good with bicycles, right? Yeah.
But back to your question, there is an incredibly you have to manage risk with any new technology, and I think with additive, it's no different. You really have to look at this and say, well, on whose shoulders does the risk lie, and how can we better communicate from a technology perspective, from an organizational perspective? The different kinds of risks. How do we develop our, testing? How do we develop our standards and, our qualification and certification for all these different parts, for all these different materials, for all these different, potential uses? And there's some fantastic conversations happening in the standards development community about that sort of thing. And so we have to look at that and sort of, really look at the entirety of this industry and say, well, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And is there a better way to do it?
At the other hand, the industry of 3D printing has a big other aspect from my side, because the topic what we have with the eco-environment, with nature and all these things, because getting recycled materials back, that is my big hope, where we could bring something into the industries, because that is, for example, on bicycles, we had these carbon fibers and all these things. What you do with a recycle, as soon as that will be really at the point where you can make the right fibers out of recycled materials, that would be a huge step for this industry, especially we as cycle industry or sport industry waiting for, because it is a good storytelling sales for your product.
Give me a second. We're talking about the brain, and I want to take the opportunity to tell our audience outside and use something about the brain, because I prepared it for yesterday and I had no chance to bring it online. And so
Sure.
give me the minute to tell you something, because it's very interesting, and if you have time you have to step to the booth. It's Zuto presents their new series Let It Brain. They have various works at their booth here in Hall 11, and this one is one of the first prototypes from the series, which once again aims to encourage people to rethink themselves and their actions with a wink. The works are made of hardened soybean oil and are created in the in-house resin printer. From the conception, modeling and printing to the final elaboration, the works are realized in-house in the Zuto studio by two of them artists. So let it brain on us. I find it very, very nice to have it here on stage, to always have something presentable from. Last year in Formnext we had some stools. I wonder why there is no stool manufacturer.
By the way, Terry presented today again the guitar. Last year.
Yeah.
Guitar. Now there's a series of guitars.
Oh, cool.
So, getting back to a more informal talk. I mean, you were talking about art. I need to address that because
Please.
I read the interview. Tell us a little about your perspective on art in 3D printing.
Sure.
I like the interview a lot.
Thank you so much. No, I was very fortunate last year. This time, I had an article published with Metal AM magazine, and the publisher Nick Williams. It was his idea, and he said, we're just so serious in this industry. We're always talking about applications, things. He said, the two of us share a background in the art world, and he said, why don't you talk about this? Why don't you talk about what some people are doing in this from a Kunst or an art perspective? And so I thought, well, this is going to be fun. I'm going to look at some really interesting examples. And what I love to talk about the art industry and any emerging technology is that it's a safe space where you can imagine. It doesn't have to have a purpose. Of course, a lot of artists have their statements and everything, but you get folks who are playing at scale, who are professionals, designers, artists, sculptors, what have you, and they're really making these amazing things.
They are exploring. They dive into the topic and they explore things and they come out with something totally new.
And I would argue that they perform a very critical role in any emerging technology space, just like any kid with a 3D printer, any R&D professional. There's a certain amount of play in there, and there's a certain amount of freedom. And I think there's a very healthy thing within our industry where we have to push the boundaries and say, well, can you print, a 2-foot-long neuron out of a binder jetting process? I mean, somebody has to do this, and I think that helps us realize how plastic our brains are, how impressionable they are, and that we do need to be thinking out of the box. We don't want to narrow things down too quickly. We don't want to say this is the use for this technology and product, because there are so many different ways to go about it.
Some years, you remember me of one experience. Some years ago, I visited Fit, the company.
Yes.
They are doing every service. They have, I don't know, every printer on the world in their houses over there, and the owner of Fit, he had a space in his production site where there was an artist doing work. So he reserved the space and he gave that to him, and it was very, very colorful. I did not understand. I cannot repeat or remember what it really was about, but I remember how cool it was that there is a space in a facility, in a production facility, just reserved for doing art and for exploring the 3D technology. It was a great experience.
And I actually talked about those guys in the article, Fit AG, and they're one of the many organizations that they don't want to say we don't do art. They want to say we do it, but
they embrace it. They embrace it.
It's different than the everyday work. It's different than having a certain kind of customer, right? And it might not necessarily turn into anything, but it helps us be human. It helps us really accept the fact that we are all part of this, and sometimes we do need to play. Sometimes we do need to build something that has a different kind of meaning. Right. And I just love that. I think it's very important that we shouldn't lose track of that, especially with an industry that is inherently disruptive. And especially when we have so many neat new things and so many people that are so enthusiastic to share it.
I must admit, I just had 1 hour to walk around. That's basically our break.
Half an hour more than me.
1 hour more than you. And I went by at Stratasys, and they have really a nice exposure of consumer goods, basically. There was a whiskey bottle printed, 3D printed. Or,
Empty or full?
pardon?
Empty or full?
In this case, full.
Okay.
I think it's fake.
But not...
Probably tea. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Keep
anyhow,
it.
really a large amount of pieces. So have you walked around and got some impressions? What are your impressions, Thorsten, of Formnext and total? Because sometimes you step by and you see something, and even if it has nothing to do with your profession or your interest, you say, "Wow, this exists." Any impressions so far?
One impression got me back to World Manufacturers meeting of sporting goods, where we got told 8 years back about, the future will be you go in a shopping area and you want to buy running shoes.
Yeah.
And you go into a studio, they will take a scan from your foot, they make your weight measurements, you run on a treadmill, and they know your running style. And then you go with your wife or with your husband to have other shoppings, and you have lunch, and you come back, then you pay and you get your customized shoes. That will be the future. And we all thought about, nice, we do maybe insoles, and that is what we do now.
Yeah.
And when here I saw a lot of running shoes or hiking shoes.
Yeah.
I saw even water sandals 3D printed. And then I saw also art like watches, like rings. I thought, wow, that's really special. And what touched me the most is because I have a little bit of history in medical, so with handicapped people. And there's a lot where I think, hopefully I never have to ask to get help from them. So it's incredible what I saw, what they do in medical topics, where they can help. It starts from teeth, goes to bones, and that is hopefully what a cyclist at the end never hopefully needs.
You need to talk to my brother-in-law. He needed it. So, sorry for that.
I talked to him, but
Yeah. No, in fact, that's something that's really amazing for you, especially prosthetics and stuff, what is possible in the future. And I similar story, because when I started to get into the industry, I have problem with my knee due to an accident years ago. And my father has 2 artificial knees, and I know what kind of pain that is, and that's really a very old way of operating. And my vision is really that I was talking about the $6 million man. Yeah, so you come to the spot and say, my knees are gone, please reprint my knee, and then you get a prosthetic that is identical to what you have before in your knee. And this would be much better. This is my future vision of 3D printing. But
That's a very cool.
what were your impressions of it so far?
Well, I think you're right to hone in on the cool factor, because I think the cool factor is really what kind of, lights you up when you walk through the show floor. We all kind of know what we're here to see. But the sorts of things that I think we take pictures on our phones and send back to our parents and say, this is really what I do, and try to explain it. But I think what we really want to do is take a picture of something we've never seen before.
Yeah.
So that cool factor, that novelty factor is so important in this industry, because it does highlight, as we started talking about digital craftsmanship, it highlights this, real new ideas that we're starting to see for the first time. So I think when we see a bike saddle or a bike seat that's printed a certain way, and you kind of go like, I want to try that, that's the feeling that people get.
what picture you took, and what is the picture you sent home?
What are the pictures that I send home? I usually take pictures of things that I'm going to say people in my family or my friends who can see it and understand it. So a lot of the shoes are actually very interesting for me, because that's something you can see it immediately and understand what it is. And there's a connection to everyday life. That way I don't have to explain too much.
I had to leave my cell phone at the technical guys, but otherwise I will show you. I took a picture here, and it was a picture of printing something like houses or walls.
Yeah.
So these impressive machine, what here in the hall.
Yeah.
So I could also say they can print ramps for bike pipes or whatever. But that was something I really took the picture of the printer who is doing something like building houses.
Yeah.
So that is the picture I sent home like a video.
Yeah, and I told you, I mean, this
That's
is
cool.
kind of the crazy development we're doing in this industry, because 3 years ago, Frank, you remember, we were talking about building industry, but really in more like art stuff, like these small, tiny bridges that were the first tests to do, and 10 people could walk over and everybody was celebrating. Today, there's a printer over there and just printing house or wall, structure, material. Yeah, this is really
it's a question of building houses and the environments for man and people is a question of material. 10 years ago, I visited a facility in Netherlands where they already had built houses, 3D printed houses made out of plastics. And it was very, handy, very useful. But then you got the feeling, do I want to live inside here? So you have another feeling of the moisture, the air, I don't know, because it was the material of everything in the house. So that was not the way I wanted to have it in my own home.
Yep.
I want to have some of the aspects of the flexibility of building, of the round corners or some shapes, And when you combine it with the technology here, printing with concrete, and then you get a picture. Okay, combining different materials, because you need some big concrete wall, but you do not want to have everything in your house made out of concrete, right? And maybe you want to have something made out of plastics or some wooden printed materials. I would like more because of the haptic and so on. So I think that is a picture, combining materials and combining methods and products. So that is what I very fond of.
By the way, there's a lot going on in sand. By the way, this is something really amazing, especially for interior aspects with 3D printing. But Frank, I mean, let's get back to you, because with Formnext TV, you are really searching for the highlights. It's not only that you walk around or your team walks around and say, this is nice, let's take a picture or take a movie or interview the guys. I mean, we have seen some of the highlights. You at least have to observe the videos, so you're getting informed by your team. What was your highlight so far?
My highlights are always the fun clips we are producing, because as you mentioned before, everything is here about business, and I had the VDMA guys here on stage, and I mentioned my highlight was here on stage, the printing of organs. We had it on Tuesday. Yeah. It's in a phase of laboratory, so it's not, you cannot see it or get any organs from the guys, but they are working on it, and they are thinking about traveling to Mars. When man sometime will travel to Mars, then they have to print organs. So that's so understandable.
It's so far away, yeah.
So far away on the same, but we are experiencing the first steps here. Mm-hmm. That is what I find so interesting. And when Tristi or the other colleagues are walking around the exhibition and doing the fun clips, it's the playful, the playful contact to the technology, and I like that very much. And give you one sentence, and if you missed these, you can go to the Formnext media library and you can watch all the clips we produced. And you can go to the Instagram and the LinkedIn profile of Formnext, and then you will all get all the fun clips and all the serious clips and all the panel discussions.
And at least the two of us can have a little bit exploration afterwards, right? This is basically it. So to summarize, and I give you just a personal impression, for me it's like, Thorsten probably I don't know how old you are, but I think we are pretty much the same age. Probably you are younger. But the funny thing is, we watch movies like 30 years ago, okay? And in these movies, like Star Trek or whatever, they showed some stuff, okay? And the funny thing is, with additive manufacturing, 30 years later, you see exactly that. There was like a miracle in the past, and now you see it alive. Isn't that crazy? And I can even go back further. I remember my first moderation in 3D printing was about when 3D printing was first shown on TV. You know when? 1958, without having it invented, because there was Tim and Struppi I don't know whether that exists in the US.
Cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were the two guys with the hats on, and they put it on a desk. It was scanned and then printed over 2 meters away. And this was the first appearance of 3D printing in television.
So very early adopters.
Here we are.
So it's all about the Belgians.
Yeah.
They
So
brought it to us.
this is what
great.
attracts me most. Whatever I'm dreaming of, and picking up your point again, Thorsten, it's like can be at a certain time be done. And I think additive manufacturing is one of the, let's say, facilitators, or the transformation to that point that is so much fun, to be honest. And this is exactly what we want to experience here, right?
Yeah, this is exactly, especially for me with the cycling industry. A friend of mine who made the race across America said, when you go for boxing, it's pain. When you go for cycling, it never should be pain.
But
With 3D printing, we can do a lot of adaptation to make people protect against pain. So it is a very nice industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So the two of you, Thorsten, was a pleasure to have you here. Frank, you as well. It was such a pleasure to talk, and so easy talk about the miracles we explored here in Formnext. It was a pleasure to have you here. Ladies and gentlemen, this was day 3. We are sorry, we have to finish our program, and I'm pretty sure you want to go on forever. Same with me and Frank and all the others. But we will see you tomorrow morning, day 4 at Formnext. We wish you a pleasant evening. Enjoy, and think about all the nice impressions you got over the day. Tomorrow, there will be more to see. See you tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, here back at the live stream. Thank you so much for watching.